Good day, good people, and welcome to Revolutionary Belovedness. I'm Robert Farrell, and whether you're here for the live session or watching the recording, thank you for being with us. If you will, let me know in the chat section that you can hear me okay and that everything's coming through all right. Very good. Thank you so much. Friends, tonight our reflection is on grief as an expression of love, honoring sorrow as a measure of what we cherish and refuse to abandon. If any of you are joining us for the first time, we have a very simple order of things here. We will take a minute to center ourselves. I'll take about 12-13 minutes to share a reflection on this. Then we'll enter into a guided inquiry as spiritual practice together. And at the end, I will offer 4 questions to let you have as a way to deepen this exploration in your own life. So you're invited now to find a seat that allows the spine to rise with ease and the shoulders to soften toward the earth. Let the eyes close or rest gently on a fixed point nearby. Allow 3 slow breaths to move through the body, each one arriving fully before it departs. And bring to mind, gently, someone or something that you once loved deeply. And notice where that love still lives in the body, in the chest, in the hands, in the warmth behind the eyes. And let this warmth be the ground for what follows. Sorrow and love share the same address in the body. And tonight's session begins by honoring that shared dwelling place. Good. And friends, keep in mind that the chat section remains open during our whole time together, so if anything comes to your heart or mind that you would like to share, feel free to use the chat. We will do our best to incorporate those things. Again, thank you. If you are a first-time visitor, settle in and feel free to use the chat whenever it feels right for you. Friends, sorrow arrives as a messenger, carrying proof of a bond that continues to matter. When the heart, when it aches over a loss, that ache confirms a connection so real that its absence registers as weight. And grief, understood this way, becomes a form of testimony. It testifies that love reached deep enough into a life, a place, a people, or a possibility that its passing leaves a mark. Every tear carries this quiet declaration: this mattered, this still matters, this will always matter. And the ache itself becomes a kind of evidence offered by the body long before the mind finds words for it, long before language arrives to explain what happened. The chest already knows. The throat already tightens. The eyes already begin their quiet work of honoring what was loved. And revolutionary love names grief as the price paid for loving fully. The phrase deserves slow consideration because it reframes sorrow entirely. Rather than treating grief as a wound to manage or a phase to move past, this understanding honors grief as evidence of a life lived in genuine relationship with people and with the world. A heart closed off from attachment might remain calm in the face of loss, and that calm arrives already carrying its own quiet cost, a kind of distance kept from intimacy itself. The trembling heart, the one that grieves, reveals itself as a heart that dared to love with its whole capacity, holding nothing back and offering itself fully to whatever the relationship required. And such a heart pays a real price, and the price itself becomes proof of the wealth that came before it, the way a full harvest leaves behind visible signs of its abundance. And friends, sitting with sorrow rather than rushing to resolve it becomes a spiritual discipline in its own right. Many contemplative paths across the world honor this same wisdom. The wound held with tenderness becomes a doorway rather than a dead end. Presence to pain deepens the capacity to sit with the pain of others, widening the heart until strangers begin to feel like kin. A quiet wonder often accompanies this widening, an emerging curiosity about the life behind the loss, the story behind the ache. And this curiosity carries the heart past its own private grief and toward the grief of others, and it rarely remains confined to a single room or a single life for long. It gathers people the way warmth gathers bodies on a cold evening, drawing them closer simply by being present. And that gathering has shaped some of history's most luminous turns. Movements for civil rights, for the dignity of workers, for the rights of immigrants, for indigenous sovereignty, and for the sanctity of every life targeted by violence, all of those trace their roots to shared mourning. People who carried little in common beyond their humanity gathered first to grieve together, sitting with loss in public view, naming what was lost and choosing to let it be spoken rather than pass in silence. And from that shared grieving, organizing grew. From organizing, songs and celebrations arose. Grief planted the seed, solidarity was the flowering, and joy became the fruit that followed both, ripening slowly across years and generations. So what made that fruit possible was the harvest of understanding hidden inside the grieving itself. You see, shared sorrow reveals precisely what deserves protection and what deserves resistance. It clarifies the shape of love by showing exactly where love was wounded. And this is why grief and justice walk so closely together, hand in hand, one informing the pace and direction of the other. To grieve rightly for a person or a people harmed by violence is already to take a first step toward standing with them, because the willingness to feel their loss opens the door to the willingness to act on their behalf. And the clarity born this way rarely stays limited to the community that's closest to the wound. It tends to widen, the way ripples widen on still water. and it widens until it touches circles far beyond their original grief and calls in companions previously unacquainted with the person lost, who come to feel the loss regardless, carried there by the sheer momentum of shared sorrow. This widening finds its fullest expression in a vision of reality as profoundly relational, every being bound to every other through invisible threads of belonging, interbeing. And within this vision, grief carries meaning that extends past the merely personal to grief for the earth, for a people whose history includes great suffering, for a stranger whose story becomes known through careful listening. That is to practice the deepest form of interconnection. Sorrow becomes a shared act of remembering that separateness was always an illusion, and that the pain of one corner of the human family belongs in some measure to the whole family. Solidarity with the cosmos and solidarity with a grieving neighbor turn out to spring from the identical source, one simply wearing a wider garment than the other. And living in this kind of solidarity asks for humility, a willingness to remember every teacher and every tradition that first modeled how to mourn with open hands rather than clenched fists. The same wonder, seated earlier in this reflection, returns here, now grown large enough to hold the whole of creation. Wonder and grief travel together more often than expected, each one finding the other in a continuous circle. You see, to wonder about another person, to ask genuinely about their life and their sorrows, opens the heart to eventually grieving alongside them. And grieving, in turn, becomes a portal back into wonder, because sitting with someone's pain reveals the fullness of who they are, their resilience, their humor, their particular way of loving the world. So grief, wonder, and love form a continuous circle, and this circle, once entered, keeps turning long after any single loss has been named. And that draws the heart back again and again into a fresh encounter. And I think that this turning explains why grief keeps arriving fresh across a lifetime, always finding new ground to touch. Sorrow may soften with time, and still it returns, arriving unannounced at anniversaries, in familiar songs, in ordinary afternoons. And friends, this returning sorrow deserves welcome rather than alarm, since its return simply confirms that love persists and that the circle of wonder and grief remains alive and turning. Bearing grief rather than resolving it because it becomes its own form of faithfulness. To bear it well is to let it shape a wider capacity for compassion, allowing what was once a private pain to become a resource for accompanying others through their own passages of loss, offered freely as a gift born from experience rather than theory. And each return of sorrow becomes another opportunity to practice this offering, a daily discipline as steady and quiet as breath itself. Bearing grief this way calls for particular courage in a culture that often prefers composure over honesty. Choosing to sit with pain in the presence of others rather than performing strength or rushing toward comfort, that models something countercultural. The truth that vulnerability is itself a form of strength, and that shared sorrow builds trust in ways that shared comfort rarely can match. A gathering willing to mourn honestly together becomes a gathering capable of profound solidarity, because the members have already shown one another their unguarded hearts. And this mutual unguarding becomes the very ground on which lasting community grows season after season. So friends, I hope that this reflection invites an honoring of every sorrow carried, personal and collective, ancient and current. I hope it invites a recognition that grief for a stranger, grief for a people whose suffering holds far away, grief for the earth itself, all of those spring from the same wellspring as grief for a beloved friend. The wellspring is love, wide enough to include the whole of creation, deep enough to hold every kind of loss with tenderness. So, friends, grief approached this way ceases to be a private burden and becomes, in this light, a shared language, one capable of uniting people across every difference of background and belief, gathering them into a single circle of recognition. So may this reflection open a wider embrace of sorrow as sacred messenger. And may every tear shed be received as confirmation of love reaching far and deep. And may the willingness to grieve alongside others become a doorway toward the solidarity, toward the justice, and the shared joy that grief, held rightly, always makes possible now and in every season still to come. Thank you for reflecting with me. Let us take a moment to share in silence together. Okay, friends, I'm going to invite us all to settle in and center down into a guided inquiry. We've been polling each person that visits, whether they like the term guided inquiry or guided meditation better. You can share your selection if you'd like. In any case, take a moment to feel the weight of your body resting against whatever holds it, the chair, the floor, the earth beneath. And notice the places of contact first, whether it's contacting the backs of the legs or the curve of the spine, the soles of the feet. Allow the breath to arrive in its own terms, moving at whatever pace it chooses this moment. Notice the shoulders settling a fraction lower on the exhale, and let 3 or 4 breaths pass this way. Good. Somewhere in the chest, a warmth or a heaviness may already be waiting. Allow your attention to rest there, the way attention rests on a familiar doorway before stepping through. And there is a texture here worth noticing slowly. A thickness, perhaps, or a tightness, or a strange kind of open space that feels larger than the body itself. And a face may surface now, or a name, or a place once held close, and since changed by distance, by time, by death. And let it arrive at its own pace, taking whatever shape feels true. A memory, a scent, a fragment of a voice. And notice what happens in your body as this presence draws near. Does the chest tighten? Does the throat gather warmth? Does your breath catch a moment, the way breath catches when love and loss meet in the same instant? Perhaps your hands want to move, resting over the heart, or opening upward. Palms soft, the way hands open when they are ready to receive something rather than hold it tightly. What does this ache actually hold on to so tenderly? What is it still protecting, still keeping close? Let that live in the body more than the mind, felt rather than solved, allowed to rest unanswered for as long as it needs. Good. Now sensation may shift here, a loosening in the jaw, a softening behind the eyes, a subtle widening across the chest, as though something long held is finally given room to breathe. And let whatever arises simply arrive, granted permission to stay exactly as long as it wants. Good. Since now the wider circle this sorrow belongs to, other hearts that have carried a similar weight, other communities that have mourned a similar loss. Where does the body register that wider circle? Perhaps there is an easing at the edges of the chest, a sense of unseen company standing near, steady and quiet, asking for nothing beyond simple presence. And allow the sorrow to rest beside the love that produced it, the two sitting together the way old companions sit together, familiar with each other's silences, comfortable enough to simply share the same quiet room. And notice how close together they actually sit, closer perhaps than expected, almost indistinguishable at their edges. Let us carry that into silence, remembering to continue to breathe, breathing in love, breathing out sorrow honored. Breathing in love, breathing out sorrow honored. Let the breath widen now, drawing your attention back to the room you're in, to the sounds nearby, to the solid ground beneath the body. You may want to let your fingers stir a little bit, remembering their own presence. Your eyes may open gradually, welcoming the light however it falls, allowing a moment for the room to come back into focus. And friends, may the heart carry its sorrows gently. May every ache be received as proof of love reaching far and wide. And may all of this hold ease, and may the ground beneath remain steady and kind. Thank you for sharing in that practice with me. So now I would offer 4 questions for deeper reflection. They will be attached to the recording within the Mighty Network. The recording's also on YouTube, but the questions will only show up in the Mighty Network, where you can return to those questions again, use them for journaling, or maybe you want to respond on the Mighty Network and share with others and enter into dialogue there. Of course, tonight, as I share these questions, if you would like to pick one or more and provide a response within the chat, you can do that as well. So let me go through these. The first is, where in life does sorrow reveal itself as proof of love, reaching deeply into a person, a place, or a cause? Maybe that should say, where in your life does sorrow reveal itself as proof of love? If something comes to your mind that you'd like to share now, please do. Next, what becomes possible when a community chooses to grieve openly and together rather than privately and alone? And next, how does the willingness to sit with pain rather than resolve it quickly shape the capacity for solidarity with others? And next, what sorrows, personal or collective, feel ready to be honored more fully within this circle? One sorrow that's very present for me is that on July 3rd, which was 2 days ago, was 5 years since my father has passed away, and I still feel his presence, his love, his mentorship, his discipline, and it always, those anniversary times seem to bring back the presence of those deeper connections and memories. And so tonight's reflections was especially meaningful for me in that sense. I'll pause for just a minute to see if anyone has anything they would like to share before we sign off. Again, whether you were here for the live session or you're watching the recording, thank you so much. I also want to remind everyone that in August, we will begin our transition away from the Mighty Network. We're going to move strictly to Substack and Crowdcast. Of course, we still have our website and Facebook page, but most of our communications, our articles and posts will be on Substack, and our live streams will be on Crowdcast. That helps us manage things a little bit easier and a little easier financially as well. So let's see. Pause for just another minute. Thank you for receiving it. Okay, friends, I hope to see you again next Sunday. Blessings to all, and good night for now.